All right, so welcome everyone. Welcome to the I Am the Way tape group. And today we're continuing with the new message that Joel was sharing with us, even in the previous series too. Like the Truth Unveiled was in fact the preparatory part of the new message. And this is all happening in 1963, but it's actually happening right now because we're activating it in our consciousness, and it is as true now as it ever was, and it will always be true. So that's always the great thing about truth. It's not limited by time, but it's only limited by that is not in your awareness if it isn't there. So now we can remember it, and we actively do that today, first with a meditation. Then I'm going to introduce the video a little bit, and then we listen to the tape of today, which is the new message part 2. And part 2 is totally different in the sense than part 1. Part 1 was very systematic. We saw like an overview of statements that Joel was bringing in as an almost like a summary of what he was sharing before. And this was very helpful in the sense that now it's all like it was all in one place. And we start a little bit like that today too, like in the sheets that I prepared. So in that sense, it's a continuation. But the very specific part that Joel is talking about is the second coming in this talk too. And this is the part that we're going to listen to. So I'm not really introducing that idea. I'll let Joel do the talking in that sense with the second coming. Of course, the second coming is the recognition of the Christ in you, and that is like that. It can only happen in you. We don't have to wait for anyone. So your acceptance of what is being shared here, that you recognize that I'm the way, is really what the second coming of Christ is. And this recognition is one of experience, not of voicing words, none of that. But like, yes, your beingness, your healing consciousness is in that. Now, talking about the consciousness, the God consciousness, that's in fact the main subject in the preparation that we will listen to later on, before we listen to the tape. And like I said, we start with a meditation that is derived from the same tape. That's amazing. So if you take out a segment and you see it in one part, then you see it like it's a beautiful way to meditate on, or let it come to you what it actually means. Let it be revealed to you what it actually means, what it says, and let it be affecting you like this. Like this is a great possibility to let these words affect you, because in fact these are not concepts that we're sharing. It's not a concept. It really is like a whole idea. So that means that if you really let that come to you, it is a portal for you to literally come out of your human experience into the recognition of your Christhood, of your healing consciousness, as Joel would say, of your holiness or your whole-mindedness. So Joel, in the introduction, you'll see that Joel is also referring to the human error needs to be illuminated. You need to look at human error. So that's also a part that comes back that I just reminded. So let's start with the meditation, and that's a very lovely silent meditation. So we will have some music first, or some words first. Then there's 5 minutes of silence, and then there's a repetition of that with some silence, and I'll play some song. But that's a great start to really calm down and come into your withinness. So don't forget to breathe, to sit back and relax and let this come to you in a way that, yeah, like you're entering your sanctuary. This is what it is. It's your temple. It's your holy place that you enter. So this is your invitation to, I'll let you go in first. God life. Living the spiritual life means finding a way to return to the Father's house, there be robed with the royal robes of sonship, and have placed upon our hand the jeweled ring of spiritual authority. On the spiritual path, we are seeking to die to our human life, a life made up of both good and evil, and be reborn into our original essence, divine consciousness, or God life. Fulfillment begins to appear with the recognition that God constitutes our consciousness, and that consciousness is infinite. It embodies our life and our being unto infinity and eternity. We are consciousness. Consciousness is our identity. Consciousness is the infinity of our being. Consciousness is the source of our being. Consciousness is the creative principle.
Dieu vit. Vivre la vie spirituelle, c'est découvrir le chemin qui nous ramène à la maison du Père, où nous serons revêtus de la robe majestueuse de notre filiation et où l'anneau précieux de l'autorité spirituelle brillera à notre doigt. Sur le chemin de l'éveil, nous aspirons à laisser derrière nous notre existence humaine, une existence tissée de lumière et d'ombre, pour renaître dans notre essence authentique, notre conscience divine ou vie véritable. L'accomplissement se révèle lorsque nous comprenons que Dieu façonne notre conscience, une conscience infinie qui incarne notre existence et notre essence à travers l'infini et l'éternité. Nous sommes conscience. La conscience est notre essence. La conscience est l'infini de notre existence. La conscience est la source de notre être. La conscience est le fondement de la création.
Thank you so much for joining. That's so great. Wow, that was also a very beautiful song that we listened to. It's great to hear some choir. And this is beautiful. It's like a mass from a requiem from 1600s, but it's so beautiful. All right, so we continue with the expressions that say, I use this preparation for listening to the video. It's a bit like this comes from the first half of the video, and we're going to listen to the second half. So it's great to have this as a preparation. Now I'll start with it right away because the expressions are pretty clear and helpful to bring you into the subject that Joel is working with in this. And yeah, the great thing with with the way that he does this is in fact putting it quite bluntly, like, well, this humanness that doesn't coexist with your spiritual experience. Like, there are not two of them. There's not God and you, or there's not your human life and your spiritual life. Now he's bringing that out. He's sharing that in a certain way, and that that makes it kind of clear, like bluntly clear, in fact. Now that's one thing to hear that, and it's another thing to accept that, and it is another thing to demonstrate this. So that's what it's in fact all about. Now this tape group was specifically like given as an instruction, like the London work was specifically given as an instruction for practitioners and teachers in England, in this case, like in England. And so the practitioner part is like, how do you become a practitioner, not by trying to be one or having a desire to be one, but you start to recognize, I'm actually accepting this, I'm actually experiencing what Joel is saying in a direct way, because I recognize the truth beyond the words that are being shared, and actually start to have some spiritual experiences. I have moments of peace, meditation is now becoming deeper and deeper, or I have opportunities to share what came to me in the sense of supporting whoever wants to receive this. And in my pure individual practice of this, you discover something, that the things of this world are starting to not become less interest, and one by one things are disappearing, like are being sorted out in your life that you don't pay attention to any longer, while it was a moment ago very important to you. And other things are coming back. So it's like there's a mind expansion going on. You come into your whole experience of yourself makes you, having a desire to have real relationships. And also, the purpose that you're so, conscious of, the one purpose that you have is in fact coming to know who you are, connecting with God, communicating becomes so important to you that, but also you're opening up for it at the same time, so that you become more receptive of what lies beyond what is in front of you, what you perceive. You start to see things in a whole different perspective. Now this you can, like, if I speak for myself, which I always do, of course, like the thing that happens to me is I don't talk a lot or have a lot of social interaction with human beings, or original human beings, like hardly ever. That hardly doesn't happen. But so this week, for instance, I got in touch with, some students of the Infinite Way that came to me, and they were completely touched by what Joel is saying. Like, they listened to this one and all kinds of teachers, but here's Joel. Then they listen to Joel, and they can't explain why it is so comforting to listen to him. Now this we recognize, of course, otherwise you would not be here. And so it is great to see that the ones that are coming to me, so to speak, or to, when you start extending this, the ones that are coming to you have a recognition with that, and they're like hungry. They're hungry to receive more about that. And sometimes you don't know how that works. Like I certainly don't know how that works, but it's really great to discover it. So even though the ones that I met, for instance, have a social have a human life, but they start to feel so comforted by what Joel is saying because of whatever reason, like this. There's something there that is so safe and so sound for them, and that it comforts. Now, this is you, in fact, this is you extending that. Since you got everyone here, since you and everyone listening to this, since you receive this, you have an ear to listen, and you allow this comforting to take place. You give that away, like it becomes, as Joel would say in what we're going to take a look at, it's like it becomes a law. Whatever you receive in your consciousness becomes a law unto man, and in a very deep sense that is of course true, and beautiful to see how that works. So I'm very happy when the ones are coming in that recognize that something happens with them when they listen to Joel and see that there are changes occurring, and that there's a certain shake-up taking place in I cannot do things anymore the way that I do. It's too painful. Like I cannot carry this pain any longer, and there must be something else. So that's really great. But I had it's great to remember that this is you. Yeah, like you walk into the world with this experience that you have by being completely comforted by Joel, or by your recognition of through the Christ in you, and your connection with God, the silence, the peace that you are experiencing. Now, so this is great. Now this is not a call to do something with it. What I'm actually sharing here is that literally becomes a law within your consciousness. And you can also say you integrate it in your being. It becomes part of you because it is recognized within your consciousness. Now this is exactly the point where Joel is sharing about in the talk that we're listening to. So here we are. So the access to God consciousness, as I called it, just like the meditation was God life, which is God consciousness. Access to God consciousness, exclamation mark, question mark. So what is it? Joel asked, what is it that constitutes spiritual consciousness? And this is really the first sentence that he says in this talk. We started with saying that God constitutes individual consciousness. That God constitutes individual consciousness. God is within you. It's a singular, subjective experience of you. Subjective in the sense of individual. But now you must remember that superimposed upon that consciousness is the human mentality, the human intellect, which has accepted two powers, two laws, two selves, myself, yourself, and it's gonna go further than that. This is what Joel says. Like, what constitutes our spiritual consciousness? We started by saying that God constitutes individual consciousness. But now you must remember that your human identity, your human thinking, your intellect, your mentality has accepted two powers. So that has in fact nothing to do with your Christ consciousness or your God consciousness. And so this is where we continue. So the trouble is the acceptance of two powers. Well, there is no such thing. Therefore, as a human, I have no access to God consciousness at all. And it is for this reason that as a human, as a human anything, and it is for this reason that as a human anything can happen to me, and most things do. Sin, disease, false appetite, poverty, anything. Anything happens to this race. Wars, slavery, imposition, injustice, everything that you see when you turn on your news app or your television or your who knows what. Everything happens to the human race. Right? Well, we can agree with that. A human being has no access to God consciousness at all. So here we go. Why is that? Joel asks. Because it has no access to the divine consciousness, which all of the time is the consciousness of mankind. It has no access to it. That's why it happens. That's why anything can happen to a human being. So, and this is interesting. So I'm stopping here just to spread this out a little bit. It's like the whole thing is like in your human construct. Have we talked about this a lot? Like in your human construct, in your dream as a human being, as in this envelopment, in this human associative cloud of ideas, where you see yourself, where you're completely embedded in, where you believe that to be your reality, all of that is in fact a substitute for God's love that is standing like right next to it, but is not a part of it. No, this whole cloud, this whole idea of humanhood is in fact a step away from it. It is a belief in two powers. It is a belief in separation from God. It is an idea of lack, limitation, disease, and disaster. It's literally, what you made of it, so to speak. This is what you have valued because you wanted it thus. And this is what makes it so incredible. So here, in this transition period that you find yourself in, and hopefully you recognize this clearly, it was like my human ideas are like God has nothing to do with it. And that's why it looks like that. That's why it's a belief in two powers and opposites, in opposing powers. Well, God doesn't know anything about opposing power being omnipotence itself. It doesn't know about it. So here we are in our transition period. I come in and I start to listen to a talk of Joel, or start to read The Infinite Way, or whatever spiritual scripture, and I start to feel really good, but I don't even know why. Like suddenly it starts to feel good to listen to it. And slowly but certainly it starts to almost like inundate into my consciousness. It sneaks into my consciousness. And you come to the point that you think like, well, the contrast is getting bigger. There's this divine consciousness that I read about, that I hear about, that I actually want to experience. And at times I think I do. I catch glimpses of it. Or there is this like horrendous cloud of chaos where I step into every Monday and get out of it on Friday. Running behind my own tail, thinking that I need to struggle for the things, to achieve the things that I think I need. And all this, and seeing that it's not working, and seeing that there's hurt, there's pain, there's injustice, there's pain, illness, disease, disaster, all of this. But so that's pretty wild. So now in my transition period, I receive this as a new energy in myself when I start to expose myself to different ideas. Like these ideas are not coming from this construct. That would be totally unhelpful. In other words, my intellect, my ideas about things, my opinions, all of this has in fact nothing to do with recognizing the truth. I don't need my intellect to have an experience of God. So I only need to open my consciousness, not knowing what anything is for, and receiving that. And that becomes more obvious, that the contrast between the dream and this experience of God is like, it has no overlap whatsoever. It is yeah, one or the other is real. Now it's up to you to decide. Okay, so continue what Joel is saying. What is this spiritual consciousness which is a healer? Well, it is my consciousness in the degree that I have become enlightened to the errors of the human mind. In other words, in the degree that I come to know that there is not God and man, that God is manifested as man. Yeah, his whole consciousness. I and my Father are one. They're not two. I have the spiritual bread, meat, wine and water. I have even the power of resurrection within me. Just think of not having to go to God for these things. Just think of not having to go to man for these things, but of awakening to the realization that I, in my I-ness, I embody them all. Do you not see that I have died to that part of humanness, and I have been reborn into some measure of spiritual consciousness? This is a question you ask yourself. Do you not see that I have died to that part of humanness, that I have been reborn into some measure of spiritual consciousness? Like, I know there is more. I know there is a different experience that I can say come into, that is given to me as soon as I let go of everything that I think I am, everything that I thought was so important a moment ago. Like, no, I don't need to go for spiritual bread, meat, wine and water anywhere. I don't have to go to God for it. I don't have to go to the world for it. I don't have to go to man for these things. Like, I don't need all the ways that I think it works. Now, that is an advanced vision, you could say, because your whole humanhood is based on an idea of comfort, safety, having this for yourself, for the security, for just to make sure that you have enough. Now you protect yourself, you invest in that, and you do it as well as you can to have a good future. All of this. Now this is something that you don't have to do, is what Joel says here. Like, you don't have to do all these things, because in fact it comes down to what can you possibly need. If this consciousness is within you, you don't need to go anywhere for it. You don't need to ask anyone for it. It is already given. It is just for you to recognize it and see it at work. It is complete and healed and whole. Like, it's complete, it's whole. So you don't need to struggle for your sustenance. You don't need to struggle for your health or sickness, or like, you don't need to do all these things that you think you need to do in order to sustain yourself. So how else can you see God at work than by letting that go? Like, you will have to let that go in order to see that it works. And this is everyone's individual experience, of course, like wherever you find yourself in this transition. But it doesn't take away that you will end up in that place that you recognize everything is given. It is all here. I don't need to look to tomorrow. For how am I going to dress tomorrow? What am I going to eat tomorrow? Like this. It's like, no, that is one day at a time. It's happening right now. It's right here. It's not going anywhere. So the invitation is then, with my open consciousness, I can actually receive the light and love that God is. And and that I and my Father are one, it becomes the portal to me. It's not a concept. So it's very much alive as a real whole idea that represents who I am. That is what I and my Father are one means. Yeah. So that goes on, and Joel repeats this in all different ways. But it's great to check it out. One more. You will find that this new message that is given to us is for that purpose of establishing the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. How? Well, he says, well, not by merely realizing that the studying that I'm doing is so benefiting my life, or the studying that you're doing is benefiting your life, but realizing this. Every truth, and this was what I was saying in the beginning, every truth realized in your consciousness becomes the law unto human consciousness. Now that operates on the same basis as our practitioner work. See, that is the great thing. It's like that is implemented. That's why it's great to be in touch. So I'll repeat the last sentence. So every truth realized in your consciousness becomes the law unto human consciousness. Now that operates on the same basis as our practitioner work. Now what does that mean that Joel says that? Because apparently that is really important. It's like it works in the same basis as our practitioner work. In other words, if you receive something in your consciousness of the truth of you, whatever part of that is, it becomes law unto men. In other words, you're not receiving that just for yourself. No, it becomes like an accepted principle that you radiate throughout the universe, you could say, that you represent by just having accepted that. Now this is exactly the practitioner work. This is what I said about, it's not a doing. No, it has nothing to do with doing. It has to do with being. You have accepted this, you've, say, imparted this in you. That becomes law. Like there's nobody who can change that in you ever again. No, you have accepted that. It is like it is put down. It is just the way that is. And that is the beauty of it. And it becomes like really like a light into this world. So the more you accept, the more that becomes whole in your experience of yourself, the more you will extend that, and it becomes law. So that's why, in a certain sense, you will lose some friends. You will not see some people around anymore. This will happen or that will happen. That seems to be human failure. That seems to be that. Is there anyone that wants to be in touch, or is that this, or whatever? You can ask human questions about it, and you see it's not necessary for you to have that in order to exist or to be. It all changed, because in fact, since you are the light, since I am the way, the truth and the light, and I've accepted, more and more I'm accepting, that becomes law. And that takes away, say, human behavior that wasn't helpful. That takes away, it has no chance of coming to you, because you literally shine it away by your presence. And this is not to blow up like a big spiritual ego. No, this is just the principle that's behind all of this. It's what Joel says is our practitioner work. Exactly the same. The work's the same. You impart it, you accept it for yourself, you start to demonstrate it, and that becomes the law. And yeah, so that you can say that is where the healing power starts. There's no confusion about this. This is what I mean. It's like there's no opposition to that idea. No, you literally extend that idea. It has no opposition. It's literally, you literally align with the will of God and extending the light. as an instrument. So that's what I'm saying. It's like there's no opposition to it. There's only one power. You receive that one power within you and start extending that. And that becomes law. So, yes. I love it. It's just great. And it's great to discover more. So, oh yeah, here's one thing that I like to share. So if you accept this, like I've accepted certain ideas. Now, because I accepted these ideas, it is easier for you to accept them because you see them at work. You see them literally demonstrated. Now it becomes easy for you to accept them too. Like that won't take that long. I might have done like years about over it to learn it. Now for you that goes quick because in fact you see the demonstration of it already, and that makes all the difference. So it's like this is how you help your brother. You could say this is how the sonship can finally be united. This is how the second coming as a sonship can manifest itself on this earth as a new heaven, as a new heaven and a new earth. And so this is where we're heading. Joel is very optimistic in his talks. You'll hear that about the second coming. Like that's about to happen. People start being born in this high new consciousness, and of course that is true. But it is only true if you say allow this. What Joel has imparted, you could say, to accept that as your truth, as truth that you receive too, and start to recognize. Then you see, oh my God, it's actually true what he's saying. It's exactly right. So anyway, so we're going to listen to Joel. So thank you for putting up with me. I always say this, but it's like thank you so much for letting me ramble a little bit, because it is great to share my discoveries with you, just only for this reason, and seeing that like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. No, this is it, man. This is great. It works. It's incredible what's given, and what you start to hear when your ears are opening. It's wonderful. So what do you have to lose? Nothing. Okay, well, great. Let's move on. Let's do this. And doing this, it means accepting it and literally exemplifying it. Yeah. So let's get Joel here.
And the milder ones, but they themselves are seeking and seeking and seeking. And every bit of seeking that they are doing is changing their consciousness and the consciousness of their congregation. And therefore, the congregations will bring forth children, brought forth in the new consciousness. And so I'm saying to you that right now, Christ consciousness is evolving as the consciousness of mankind. And the greater recognition that is given to us means the greater degree of Christ consciousness that is being recognized. And this means the greater degree of Christ consciousness that the next generation is being born into. Now, you are witnessing in all relationships between nations a great change taking place. There are as many mistakes being made in this awakening as there was in the days of the ignorance. But at least the mistakes are not of the same nature. Therefore, they will not have the same destructive power. In other words, nations are being given their freedom without having any capacity for maintaining that freedom. Nations are being given the right to self-govern that haven't the awareness of how to self-govern. And therefore these nations are going to go through years and years and years of hardships. But it makes no difference, because during all of these years, they're gaining the knowledge of how to self-govern, and they're increasing the education of their people. And so regardless of what seems to be the horrors through which they're going, they're heading in the right direction. So it is that all nations in this century have been going through a purification process. You wouldn't recognize it as that ordinarily. You would think of it really as evil men causing all the evil conditions on earth. It hasn't been that at all. It hasn't been the evil men causing these conditions. It has been the higher consciousness coming in and breaking up the evil conditions that have existed on earth. The evil conditions were here. You know, in the States we refer a great deal to the good old days. And when you ask some of our workers in the factories over there about it, they'll say they weren't the good old days for us. And they were right, too. It wasn't the good old days for them. No. Not the days when men were receiving $1 a day wages. Couldn't have been the good old days for them. So the evil conditions were there. And that which we call the evil of now really represent the breaking up of the evil conditions that were there. So it is, you are going to discover that the activity of the Christ in consciousness now is breaking up the evils of this world. In whatever direction you may look, you will discover that nothing good is being destroyed. Nothing good is being destroyed. Evils are being broken up. Now, while they're being broken up, some of us may suffer temporary losses through it. That is a natural phenomena of change. I was in the business world for 22 years as an importer of laces from Europe. And now there is no imported lace industry in the United States, and all but one firm went out bankrupt. Only one firm had the vision to go out before they were bankrupt. All the others went out bankrupt. And you say, oh, what a horrible evil. Heavens no. In place of our little industry, there is now a ready-to-wear industry that makes clothing so much less expensive for women and so much easier to buy, to make, to purchase, so that a great blessing has come upon the world through the ready-to-wear industry. We who didn't have vision to see it coming, we just lost out. So it is that today, the day of automation, it is true that there are individuals who are going to suffer terribly through it. Be thrown out of employment, probably have to live on relief and doles. You say, what's good about that? Well, so far as they individually are concerned, it isn't good. But just remember that once they are out of the way, it's going to be a whole new world for everybody through automation, for workers as well as for the users of products. You're going to find that those who are employed are going to be employed at far greater wages than the former ones were, and that there will be greater amount of products turned out for far less money. And so you say it's too bad for those who suffered But then, hasn't that always been the way? People have gone to war to gain their freedom, and they've died, been wounded, lost limbs, but then future generations went on to live in freedom. So that individual suffering in the human experience is inevitable while we're going through this transitional period of change. And there's no way to avoid it. The only way to avoid it would be by everybody becoming spiritual. By being spiritual, they'd be lifted out of it. But everybody hasn't the capacity to turn to the Spirit or to benefit by spiritual wisdom, and therefore they will suffer. In the same way that this second coming of the Christ is not going to benefit all those who are on earth today. It is not going to benefit most of the people in India or China today, or the Southeast, the Oriental part of the world. It is not going to benefit probably most of the people of 30 years in age and up, or even 20 years of age and up. It is producing, this activity of the Christ is producing a new consciousness in which the old things will be wiped out and disappear, and a new world will be born. Some who have the capacity to turn to the Spirit, some who turn to the Spirit and who will have the capacity to stop praying for human betterment, will even now receive the benefit of this new high consciousness. In fact, any infinite way student who finds themselves with enough grace to stop praying for improved humanhood, to turn within only for a revelation of the kingdom of God, the things of God, the peace that God giveth, the kingdom of God, the universe of God. Those can benefit whether they are 20 or whether they are 90. As long as they can inwardly make the transition from praying to a God of spirit for earthly things. In any moment, in the twinkling of an eye, we can be reborn. But that only means because divine grace has led us to this place. And if we can receive this message, we, at any age that we find ourselves, can come into the new consciousness. On the other hand, those who may only be 20 years of age, if they haven't yet been led to a spiritual message, they may go through the rest of their days without benefiting from this new consciousness. But be assured of this, that as the new generations are born, they are being born into this new consciousness, and there will be less on earth of warfare, bias, bigotry, prejudice, less of injustice, less of man's inhumanity to man. And not because men are improving, but because the men who are being born will be born into Christ consciousness, and some who are on earth are dying daily to their humanhood and being reborn of the Spirit. Now, you will find in the new message, in this new tapes, you will find reference to this. You will find that this new message that is given to us is for that purpose of establishing the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. How? Not merely by realizing that the studying that I'm doing is benefiting my life, or the studying that you are doing is benefiting your life, But by realizing this, every truth realized in your consciousness becomes the law unto human consciousness. Now, that operates on the same basis as our practitioner work. Every truth that becomes realized in my consciousness is becoming the law unto the Infinite Way students' lives, and their minds, and their bodies, and their morals, and their supply. Every truth realized in my consciousness is becoming the law of grace unto thousands of Infinite Way students. Now just remember this. Every principle realized in your consciousness is becoming the law unto human consciousness. You may see it operate in some member of your family. You may see it operate in a neighbor. You may see it operate in a business associate or a political associate. But be assured of this. Every realized spiritual truth in your consciousness is becoming a law unto this universe. And wherever you are, some measure of your divine consciousness is influencing those around you. I could give you illustrations from Cape Town to London and from Bombay to Hawaii of illustrations that I have witnessed of how these truths that have been embodied in my consciousness have become the law of harmony unto your consciousness. And how every one of these realized truths in your consciousness has become a law to someone else that has come within the range of your consciousness. It cannot help but be a truth realized in consciousness becomes a law unto consciousness. And how are you going to confine it to a person? It doesn't become a law to a person, it becomes a law unto consciousness. Surely the person most nearly attuned receives the first and greatest benefit. But eventually, watch this circle. Watch how it is that even friends and relatives who cannot directly accept the message are showing forth some good through the message. It's inevitable. It is inevitable. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a business associate, someone who has noticed something in you and says, give me some of it. And so it is, you think, well, how does anyone know that I've got this? I haven't told anyone. You don't have to. That's the beauty of this. The Master said, go and tell no man. Go and tell no man. You don't have to. It's shining in your face. And then someone comes and asks. Or, even without asking, they benefit. No. I give you this as a principle. Every truth realized in your consciousness becomes a law unto consciousness. And therefore, we, on 6 continents and a lot of islands, who are realizing spiritual principles, are forming the consciousness of the new generation. It really didn't begin with us, you know. You have all of the spiritual wisdom of Lao Tzu, of Gautama, of Jesus, of John, of Paul. You have all of the spiritual wisdom of the mystics of the world. That helped to form our consciousness. Without that, we would have been born as savages. It was what was placed in consciousness by the mystics of the world that enabled us to be born not cannibals. Why weren't we born cannibals? Why weren't we born savages? Because a higher consciousness had evolved into this world. And we are all beneficiaries of it. And so it is that the activity of consciousness that functioned as Mrs. Eddy's healing work has opened this whole world to the idea of spiritual healing. Out of her work came unity, out of her work came new thought. Out of that has come the Orthodox Church being willing to listen to the idea of spiritual healing. And so again, it didn't start with her. Jesus was also doing healing. Gautama the Buddha was doing healing. But here was another instrument that gave it to the world. And so it is that every illumined consciousness has added illumination to the consciousness of the world. Now, we are at an acute stage for this reason, that it never before has been known that every truth received in consciousness becomes a law unto consciousness. That has been revealed through the infinite way. We know it now, and so each truth that we consciously realize, we will realize as being realized or established in human consciousness. And that will give greater power to the work that we are doing. Some of the earlier metaphysical work was only the patient was improved. But now we know better. It isn't only the patient that's improved, it's all human consciousness is improved. It was prophesied that in this century the secret of spiritual power would be revealed. Well, it has been revealed in the infinite way. Spiritual power is not a power that can be used. And spiritual power is not a power over anything or anybody. Spiritual consciousness is the consciousness of perfection, which is the consciousness of mankind. And in that recognition, you bring it forth into expression. And don't forget, as you know this, just think of the difference. Heretofore, we malpracticed everybody on earth who wasn't of our own household. Heretofore, if we didn't like a nation, we hated them, and we criticized them, and we malpracticed them. Heretofore, if we didn't like an individual, we did it. Or if we didn't like a whole nation, we did it. Or if we didn't like a whole religion, we did it. But remember that we are living in an era now in which already consciousness is so imbued with love that even the Roman Catholic Church is willing to acknowledge that the rest of us are not going to hell and that they can intermarry with us without making us change our... In fact, it says that each person should have the right to choose their own religion. This has never been done in that church before. Do you not see the higher consciousness at work? Do you not see that it's already here? When they are willing to forgive sinners, they are willing to acknowledge us poor Protestants. We're not even Protestants, are we? Matter of fact, rightly speaking, we can't be called Christians because we disclaim so much of what Christianity is accepted. We're just heathens. Heathens who know the truth. Who know enough of it at least to love our neighbor, whether our neighbor agrees with us or disagrees with us, whether our neighbor is our friend or our enemy. We are willing to feed our enemy. See the higher consciousness that has already come into being on earth. And then believe me, not because I say it, but believe me because somewhere your heart must reveal it to you, that the second coming of Christ is here, and that we are playing a part in its unfoldment. And one of the major ways is by knowing that every truth realized in our individual consciousness becomes a law. Well, now, just imagine this. A group of our students last Sunday met in a small town in California on Sunday morning for a prayer service on the beach. And they were greeted there by policemen and told they couldn't stay there because a tidal wave was due to explode at any time. Well, they were given permission to stay long enough for their prayer service and then immediately evacuated from the beach. And one of the students said, "We must not accept this. We must not accept this. We must do something about it. We must understand the nature of one power," etc., etc. And this little group met and agreed that they would realize this. And now they're out looking for the tidal wave. It hasn't appeared. Nobody can find where it went. Therefore, truth realized in my consciousness became the law unto their consciousness, and the truth realized in their consciousness became the law of safety to the whole community. Is that right?
Yes.
When we went to New Zealand a couple of years ago, we were warned not to go there on a certain day. There was to be a tidal wave in the Pacific, and it was to hit the center of Auckland. We hit the center of Auckland that day. Tidal wave didn't frighten us. And the volcanic eruption that was to have taken place in the Pacific did take place. But the tidal wave that was to hit the middle of Auckland hasn't struck there yet. They haven't found it. Do you not see that a truth realized in the consciousness of an individual becomes the law unto that individual, unto that community, unto the entire world? So it is. Now, once you remember that you're not dealing with a religious teaching that is really meant to glorify you or make you healthy, wealthy, and wise, but that it is only to show forth the Christ consciousness, and the fruit of it is the health or the wealth or the happiness, but that God did not intend this for you or me. Could you imagine such a thing as God revealing these truths of the infinite way to me for my benefit? Do you have any picture of anything like that? No. Then when I received them, I had to do something. And that something was start to share them. But because it was an activity of the Christ, I humanly didn't know how. And so every step I have been led. Every step I have been led. So it is with you. Never think for a minute that God's grace brought you to a message of this nature for your good. No, God's grace doesn't work that way. God's grace brought you to this message that you may show forth the fruitage of Christ consciousness and therefore be an instrument for establishing it on earth. And you may be assured that every truth you know, every healing that takes place through your consciousness is establishing that truth, that healing grace, in human consciousness. And one of these days, people will be talking this way as if this had been the language forever. We won't be here, so we won't know that it has become the universal language, unless, of course, in our rebirth, some of us may be shown that we were here when all this was beginning. But otherwise, we'll come back to participate in it without ever knowing that we helped to inaugurate it. So it would be a good idea to pray that in our new birth that we be given the vision of the part we played in it, so at least we can enjoy that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. That was so great. So yeah, he brings this idea very clearly today. It's like it becomes law unto your consciousness. So whatever you receive of the truth, like, becomes law, and this is what we recognize. And in fact, that's your practitioner presence, you could say, or that what you extend. Not having to do anything for that. It's almost like your secret, but at the same time you extend it, and whatever is needed you will do it. And so that's so great. So thank you, Joel, and thank you for listening to this today with me here, and I hope to see you next week. We're playing a song here, but yes, have a great rest of your day and a great night. Thank you so much. Bye for now.